It was the year's most memorable wedding. The vast hall was filled with the aroma of fresh flowers. The venue was beautifully adorned, and the sound of laughing from loved ones filled the air. But when Thomas, the groom, grasped for his wife, Clara's hand to say "I do," the idyllic moment was interrupted by a sharp voice. It was not a mistake in the ceremony, a crowd's protest, or a jealous ex. Standing up with tears in her eyes, Kathy, his own 12-year-old daughter, was determined to call off the wedding. The music ceased. The bride was frozen. With shocked expressions, on their faces the visitors turned to gaze. The words that would alter everything were said by a shaky but determined Kathy. "Dad, you can't marry her." There was silence in the room. For a brief moment Clara's bright grin wavered, but she quickly covered it up with bewilderment. Thomas stared incredulously as he stood at the altar. As he gazed at his daughter, the happiness on his face turned to concern. His voice broke the quiet and he murmured softly, "Kathy, what's going on?" As Kathy struggled to control her breathing, her chest grew and drooped. Her little body was shaking, her hands clenched. Her eyes were wide with terror and determination as she turned to confront her father. "You can't marry her, Daddy. She's not who you think she is." Like a thunderclap, the words lingered in the air. The guests' interest and uneasiness grew like wildfire as they spoke to one another. Clad in her immaculate white gown, Clara stepped forward a little. With a tone of fake tenderness, she murmured gently, "Kathy, what's wrong, darling? Did something happen?" The greatest day of a father's life would turn into the most chaotic, life-altering event he could have ever imagined in a matter of minutes. The only one who knew the truth was Kathy. Her father was blind, and she was the only one who noticed it. The sense that something was wrong was eating away at her. The truth was indisputable and on the verge of being revealed, but she didn't want to accept it or destroy his happiness. There was too much tension in the room. Looking between his daughter and his future wife, Thomas's fists tightened at his sides. The visitors could sense the cracks in Clara's steady exterior. There was a problem. Thomas was meant to have the best day of his life, one that was full of love and fresh beginnings. However, Kathy's remarks had completely changed the situation. It was time to reveal the truth. How did we get here? How could a 12-year-old girl discover something so startling that none else could? What had happened that a child's bravery was the only thing preventing her father from making a disastrous error? This is the tale of Kathy, a little girl who saw what no one else did, a child who loved her father too much to keep quiet, and a young girl who, in a single act of bravery, interrupted a wedding and altered the course of history. After years of heartache, Thomas, a beloved father, widower, and businessman, had at last found love once again. His whole universe revolved around his 12-year-old daughter, Kathy. After losing his wife, her mother, to a disease that left a lasting hole, in their hearts they had endured many hardships together. When Kathy's mother died, she was only 5 years old. She had dim recollections of her mother, a gentle voice singing her lullabies, a kind smile, and the lingering aroma of lavender wherever she went. It had only been Kathy and her father since her mother passed away. Thomas raised Kathy as best he could by himself. He put in a lot of overtime to support her, but he never allowed his work stop him from being there. He was there for every school recital, goodnight tale, and skinned knee. He was more than simply Kathy's father. He was everything to her. Even Kathy could feel the anguish in Thomas despite his deep love for his daughter. It was in the way he stared at old pictures of her mother when he thought no one was looking, and the way he sat silently at the dinner table after she had gone to bed. Kathy understood that he was lonely. Clara and Thomas met at a charity banquet one day. He eventually presented her to Kathy as his new romantic partner. For Thomas, everything appeared to change when Clara entered their life. Clara was lovely, attractive and compassionate, and she seemed like a godsend. Or she seemed to be. When Thomas was feeling the most alone, she entered their life. She provided Thomas and Kathy with warmth, company, and an apparent sincere affection. However, looks may be misleading. When her mother passed away, Kathy first thought that Clara was the nicest thing that had ever happened to her and her father. Clara was courteous, elegant, and lovely. People felt special around her, as if they were the only ones in the room. Thomas felt optimism, something he hadn't had in years, as she smiled at him. Clara soon established herself as a constant in their lives. She restored laughter and warmth to their household, and Kathy saw her father smile for the first time in a long time. Clara helped Kathy feel unique in addition to making Thomas happy. She would assist her with her schoolwork, make cookies with her, and tell her how fortunate she was to have such a great father. Clara appeared like a dream come true for a little child who had been raised without a mother. She started to seem to Kathy like the mother she had always dreamed of. She began to see her life when Clara was formally adopted into their family. She saw family movie evenings, park outings, and bedtime tales similar to those her mother used to tell her. However, the dream was short-lived. The alterations were mild at first. Clara's charming personality would change when Thomas wasn't there. Her kind comments gave way to stern orders as her patience went thin. Clara would yell at Kathy to pick up her toys if she left them in the living room. Clara's eyes would tighten in frustration if she dropped her drink during supper. Clara would respond icily, "You're old enough to know better. Do you want your father to think you're a spoiled brat?" When her father was absent, Clara was quite different, and Kathy couldn't figure out why. She made a greater effort to be kind and to please Clara, but to no avail. Clara became progressively colder over time. Clara had a darker side when she was alone. She would chastise Kathy for the tiniest things, critiquing her behavior or appearance. One evening while Thomas was at work, Clara hissed, "If you continue to act like a brat, you'll never grow up to be anything." However, it didn't end there. Threats accompanied Clara's rage. "If you tell your dad what I say to you, I'll make sure he never believes you. He loves me more than you think, and I'll make sure you're out of this house for good." Clara snarled, her voice razor-sharp. The threats followed. When Kathy was playing one evening and unintentionally knocked over a vase, Clara took hold of her arm and drew her in. "Do you know how much that cost? If you ever tell your father how I talk to you, you'll regret it. Do you understand me?" she said in a low, scary voice, and Kathy nodded despite the tears in her eyes. She was too afraid to take any more action. Kathy began to recognize Clara for who she really was after that. She was a lie. The lovely, caring lady who had captured her father's heart. Behind the scenes, Clara was a very different person, cruel, domineering, and cunning. Kathy was at a loss for what to do. She didn't want to destroy her father's happiness, since she loved him. Thinking that maybe Clara would change, she remained mute. However, things just got worse. Clara was dangerous in addition to being cruel. Kathy will soon learn the extent to which Clara would go in order to achieve her goals. The more weeks that went by, the worse Clara's conduct became against Kathy. What began as chilly comments and vague threats evolved into something far worse. Clara was the epitome of elegance when Thomas was around, showing off her affection for their little family, doting on Kathy and laughing at his jokes. However, the mask came off as soon as he departed for work. Kathy dropped a glass of water on the kitchen counter one day by mistake. Clara lost her tolerance. She shouted, "What's wrong with you?" and picked up a towel to wipe up the mess. "Can't you do anything right?" Kathy said, "I'm sorry," her cheeks flaming with shame. "Sorry doesn't fix it," Clara yelled. She tossed the damp towel into the sink and looked at Kathy with icy eyes. "You're lucky your father wasn't here to see this. He'd be so disappointed." When Thomas had to work late one evening, the real difficulty began. Sitting in the living room, Kathy was sketching portraits of her father, herself, and Clara. She was attempting to persuade herself that maybe she just needed to make a greater effort to get along with Clara, and that things weren't as horrible as they seemed. With her shoes tapping on the wood floor, Clara entered. She scowled as she looked at Kathy's artwork. "What are you doing?" Kathy said, "I'm drawing us," and held out the image. With a snarl curving her lips, Clara grabbed the paper out of her hands. "This doesn't look like us. You made me look like a monster." Kathy's gaze expanded. No, I didn't, Clara exclaimed. Enough, in a harsh, low voice. She ripped the sketch in two and flung it on the ground. Let me make something clear, Kathy. I'm going to marry your father, and when I do, things are going to change around here. Do you understand me? A shiver went down Kathy's back. With tears running down her cheeks, she nodded. Good, Clara responded, standing up straight. Now clean up this mess before your father gets home. I don't want him seeing you like this. After that night, Kathy did her best to avoid getting in Clara's way. She spent much of her time in her room or in the garden, avoiding her whenever possible. For Kathy, the weeks before the wedding were a living hell. Clara became more aloof and cunning. Then, however, something occurred that completely altered the situation. One evening, Kathy overheard a discussion when Clara believed she was sleeping. In the kitchen, Clara was talking on the phone in a low, frantic voice. No, he doesn't suspect anything, Clara said. Just stick to the plan. Once the wedding is over, we'll have access to everything. The accounts, the business, all of it. Kathy felt her heart thumping in her chest. Although she didn't fully comprehend Clara's words, she did grasp enough. Clara was dangerous in addition to being cruel and domineering. Additionally, she had a scheme that would destroy her father's life. Kathy realized she could no longer remain quiet. The wedding had to be called off by her. However, how? As a 12-year-old girl, how could she persuade her father that the lady he loved was not who everyone believed her to be? Kathy made the decision to begin observing Clara in order to gather proof for her father. Unfortunately, Clara was aware that Kathy was observing her. She was aware that the little girl was more intelligent than most people realized. Kathy's presence was an issue, a danger to her plan's successful implementation. Clara had meticulously woven her web for months, winning Thomas's confidence, winning over his friends, and becoming involved in every aspect of his life. Clara was aware that her plans would always be in danger as long as Kathy was around. Clara made the decision that Kathy had to go at that point. She made the decision to enroll Kathy in a residential school. Thomas needed to be convinced that it was the correct choice by Clara. In order to make him feel as if he had no other option, she had to frame Kathy for something significant that would persuade Thomas that his daughter was misbehaving and required discipline. It took place on a calm afternoon. Clara summoned Kathy in as she was singing to herself and arranging some of her jewels in the bedroom. Sweetheart, Clara murmured, her voice brimming with phony kindness. Is there anything you can do for me? Unwilling to defy Clara yet cautious of her, Kathy entered. What is it? Clara said. I need you to hold on to this for me, and gave Kathy a velvet jewelry bag. Just for a minute while I finish sorting these. Without hesitation, Kathy accepted the packet. She waited for Clara to finish, standing silently. Clara, however, seemed to take her time. Can I put this down now? Kathy inquired after a few minutes had passed. Of course, grinned Clara. Just set it on the dresser. Thank you, sweetheart. Kathy was relieved to be free of Clara, so she put the bag on the bureau and headed back to her bed. She was unaware, however, that Clara was not finished. Later that night, with a look of astonishment and betrayal on her face, Clara barged into the living room. There's something missing, Thomas, she sobbed, holding the empty jewelry bag in her fingers. My necklace, the one you gave me, is gone. Startled, Thomas raised his head from his reading. Gone? What do you mean? The words, I just had it this afternoon, came out of Clara's shaking voice. I don't want to accuse anyone, but I think Kathy was the last person who had it. On the sofa, Kathy, who had been sitting calmly, froze. I didn't take anything, she responded, anxiety increasing in her voice. She asked me to hold it, but I gave it back. Thomas wrinkled his brow and said, Is that true, Kathy? Yes, I swear, Kathy responded, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't take anything. Clara's sobs, however, were more persuasive. Thomas, I don't want to believe she'd do something like this, but maybe she's struggling more than we realized. Maybe she needs help, structure. With a heavy sigh, Thomas combed through his hair. Kathy, this is serious. If you did take it, you need to tell me now. I didn't, said Kathy. She's lying. I didn't do anything. Vanessa discovered the jewelry concealed inside Kathy's bag. Kathy's objections were ignored. She sobbed, Dad, I didn't do it, I swear. But she was drowned out by Clara's accusations and weeping. Clara's eyes gleamed with phony anguish, and her lips clenched. Thomas, maybe we should think about sending her to boarding school. At least for a little while, it might give her the discipline and stability she needs. Kathy sat in her room that night with tears running down her cheeks. She was shocked by what was taking place. She was certain that Clara had set her up. However, how could she get her father to see that? He had seemed so disheartened and uncertain about what to believe. Thomas and Kathy sat down at the kitchen table the next morning. He had a solemn yet kind countenance. Kathy, we need to talk, he addressed her. Kathy's eyes were red with tears as she glanced up at him. Daddy, I didn't do it, she muttered. I didn't take anything. With a groan, Thomas grabbed her hand. Sweetheart, I want to believe you, I really do. But Clara wouldn't lie about something like this. We both saw the necklace in your backpack. I know it's been hard for you to adjust to having her in our lives. And I know you miss your mom, but I think maybe this is part of the problem. What do you mean? Kathy said in a shaky voice. I think Clara's right. Thomas answered nonchalantly. Maybe some time away would help you adjust. Boarding school isn't a punishment, Kathy. It's a chance for you to grow and learn. With a broken heart, Kathy withdrew her hand. You're sending me away, she murmured in a broken voice. Because of her. The words, it's not because of her, were said hastily by Thomas. It's because I want what's best for you. I know it's hard now, but you'll see. This will be good for all of us. Kathy made the decision that night that she could no longer remain quiet. She had to be honest with her father about all Clara had done, not just the stolen jewelry. After waiting for Clara to leave the home, she located Thomas in his study. With a shaky voice, she added, Daddy, I need to talk to you. Thomas grinned quietly as he raised his head from his papers. What is it, sweetheart? With her pulse racing, Kathy paused. It's about Clara. A trace of annoyance flickered over Thomas's face as his mood changed. Kathy, we've talked about this. You need to give her a chance. Kathy responded, No, Daddy, listen. Her voice increasing in desperation. She's not who you think she is. She's been mean to me when you're not around. She yells at me, and she said if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. She framed me for the necklace. Thomas leaned back in his chair and scowled. Kathy, I know this has been hard for you, but you're letting your imagination get the best of you. Clara loves you and she loves me. She's trying her best to make this work. She doesn't love me, Kathy sobbed. She's pretending. She's only doing this to get what she wants. Thomas said, Kathy, enough. With firmness. You're a smart girl, but you're still a child. You don't understand how complicated things can be. Clara has done nothing but try to make you feel welcome. You need to give her a chance. It broke Kathy's heart. The expression on his face warned her that screaming would not help him realize the reality. Not yet. He wouldn't believe her. Kathy needed indisputable evidence that Clara was harmful, not just bad news. The next day, Clara's phone rang on the kitchen counter as Kathy was tidying her room. Curious, Kathy took a quick look at it. Almost as if she was worried that someone would see what was on her phone, Clara kept it near at all times. However, she had left it behind today. With her pulse racing, Kathy paused. She couldn't ignore the nagging sensation in her chest, even though she knew it was unethical to spy. This may be her last opportunity to discover what Clara was concealing. Kathy took up the phone with shaking hands and used the code she had secretly learned to unlock it. As she read through the messages, she halted upon seeing Nathan, a name she was unfamiliar with. As Kathy browsed through Clara's phone, her hands shook. On many occasions, she had seen Clara swiftly tucking her phone away whenever her father entered the room. Kathy was handling it for the first time, however, and what she discovered would alter everything. Nathan's words were straightforward, bordering on authoritative. He said something about getting complete control of the funds and signing documents prior to the wedding. Even though she didn't fully comprehend the discourse, Kathy was able to identify her father's name. They were discussing her father's finances and company. With a heavy sigh, Thomas combed through his hair. "Kathy, this is serious. If you did take it, you need to tell me now." "I didn't," said Kathy. "She's lying. I didn't do anything." Vanessa discovered the jewelry concealed inside Kathy's bag. Kathy's objections were ignored. She sobbed, "Dad, I didn't do it, I swear." But she was drowned out by Clara's accusations and weeping. Clara's eyes gleamed with phony anguish, and her lips clenched. "Thomas, maybe we should think about sending her to boarding school. At least for a little while, it might give her the discipline and stability she needs." Kathy sat in her room that night with tears running down her cheeks. She was shocked by what was taking place. She was certain that Clara had set her up. However, how could she get her father to see that? He had seemed so disheartened and uncertain about what to believe. Thomas and Kathy sat down at the kitchen table the next morning. He had a solemn yet kind countenance. "Kathy, we need to talk," he addressed her. Kathy's eyes were red with tears as she glanced up at him. "Daddy, I didn't do it," she muttered. "I didn't take anything." With a groan, Thomas grabbed her hand. "Sweetheart, I want to believe you, I really do. But Clara wouldn't lie about something like this. We both saw the necklace in your backpack. I know it's been hard for you to adjust to having her in our lives, and I know you miss your mom, but I think maybe this is part of the problem." "What do you mean?" Kathy said in a shaky voice. "I think Clara's right," Thomas answered nonchalantly. "Maybe some time away would help you adjust. Boarding school isn't a punishment, Kathy. It's a chance for you to grow and learn." With a broken heart, Kathy withdrew her hand. "You're sending me away," she murmured in a broken voice. "Because of her." The words, "It's not because of her," were said hastily by Thomas. "It's because I want what's best for you. I know it's hard now, but you'll see. This will be good for all of us." Kathy made the decision that night that she could no longer remain quiet. She had to be honest with her father about all Clara had done, not just the stolen jewelry. After waiting for Clara to leave the home, she located Thomas in his study. With a shaky voice, she added, "Daddy, I need to talk to you." Thomas grinned quietly as he raised his head from his papers. "What is it, sweetheart?" With her pulse racing, Kathy paused. "It's about Clara." A trace of annoyance flickered over Thomas's face as his mood changed. "Kathy, we've talked about this. You need to give her a chance." Kathy responded, "No, Daddy, listen," her voice increasing in desperation. "She's not who you think she is. She's been mean to me when you're not around. She yells at me and she said if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. She framed me for the necklace." Thomas leaned back in his chair and scowled. "Kathy, I know this has been hard for you, but you're letting your imagination get the best of you. Clara loves you and she loves me. She's trying her best to make this work." "She doesn't love me," Kathy sobbed. "She's pretending. She's only doing this to get what she wants." Thomas said, "Kathy, enough," with firmness. "You're a smart girl, but you're still a child. You don't understand how complicated things can be. Clara has done nothing but try to make you feel welcome. You need to give her a chance." So it broke Kathy's heart. The expression on his face warned her that screaming would not help him realize the reality. Not yet. He wouldn't believe her. Kathy needed indisputable evidence that Clara was harmful, not just bad news. The next day, Clara's phone rang on the kitchen counter as Kathy was tidying her room. Curious, Kathy took a quick look at it. Almost as if she was worried that someone would see what was on her phone, Clara kept it near at all times. However, she had left it behind today. With her pulse racing, Kathy paused. She couldn't ignore the nagging sensation in her chest, even though she knew it was unethical to spy. This may be her last opportunity to discover what Clara was concealing. Kathy took up the phone with shaking hands and used the code she had secretly learned to unlock it. As she read through the messages, she halted upon seeing Nathan, a name she was unfamiliar with. As Kathy browsed through Clara's phone, her hands shook. On many occasions, she had seen Clara swiftly tucking her phone away whenever her father entered the room. Kathy was handling it for the first time, however, and what she discovered would alter everything. Nathan's words were straightforward, bordering on authoritative. He said something about getting complete control of the funds and signing documents prior to the wedding. Even though she didn't fully comprehend the discourse, Kathy was able to identify her father's name. They were discussing her father's finances and company. Kathy, however, had no intention of giving up. She wasn't going to let her father fall into a trap because she was his daughter. Now her only objective was to reveal Clara's true nature, and she would go to any lengths. Kathy was aware that the poison was genuine. She had seen that Clara had brought it up in her correspondence with Nathan. However, she was unaware of its location or Clara's intended usage. After making the decision to search the home, she began in Clara's room. Kathy felt she had to take the opportunity, even if it was a hazardous move. Kathy sneaked into Clara's room late one evening after Thomas and Clara had gone to bed. She unlocked the closet door and started looking through the shelves, her heart thumping in her breast. Clothing, shoes, and a perfectly lined row of handbags made up the most of it as she had anticipated. However, Kathy discovered a little unlabeled bottle concealed beneath a pile of shoeboxes in the closet's rear. She brought it up to the light, her hands shaking. It contained a transparent, quite ordinary-looking liquid. Kathy, however, was wiser. The poison Clara intended to use on her father was this. Her stomach turned at the notion. Who could be so malevolent? How could a woman joke and smile with a guy while secretly plotting his eviction? Careful not to leave any sign of her presence, Kathy returned the bottle to its original location. Now she had the poison, the images, the messages she needed. Everything was starting to fit together. She still needed a strategy, however. How could she tell the truth without giving Clara any opportunity to distort it? Kathy realized she needed to move quickly since the wedding was just a few days away. She was unable to let Clara to execute her schemes. She could not allow her father to wed a lady who was not in love with him, who intended to poison him, and who would steal everything from him. However, Kathy was also aware that notifying her father alone would not enough. Clara was too skilled at deceiving and convincing others to believe her. Kathy wanted a means to reveal herself to the world. She believed that the wedding would be the ideal occasion. Everyone would be there, including some of Thomas's business colleagues as well. As friends and family, Clara wouldn't be able to dispute the truth if Kathy were to tell it in front of everyone. The falsehoods would come undone. She documented everything she had seen and heard, arranging it so that even the most cynical individual could not ignore. Clara's attitude on the eve of the wedding was very positive. As she laid out her outfit and gushed about how thrilled she was to be a genuine family at last, she hummed to herself. With her hands gripped firmly in her lap, Kathy remained silent as she sat at the dinner table with her father and Clara. With her phony grin, Clara inquired, "Are you excited for tomorrow, Kathy?" Kathy forced herself to glance up into Clara's eyes. "Yeah," she responded gently, her voice quivering just enough to give the impression that she was innocent. Not just yet. She didn't want Clara to suspect anything. Thomas grabbed Kathy's hand and squeezed it. He remarked, "It's going to be a beautiful day," in a pleasant voice. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I know this hasn't been easy, but you've handled it so well." A knot formed in Kathy's throat. She wanted to scream the truth at the top of her lungs, to tell him the truth then and then. However, she refrained. She needed to wait for the right time. The wedding day began with a gorgeous and bright dawn. The mansion was bathed in a golden glow as sunlight poured through the windows. It was the ideal day for a celebration for the majority of people. For Kathy, however, it was the quiet before the storm. There was a lot going on in the home. Caterers were putting up trays of food, florists were arranging flowers, and visitors, all dressed to the nines, were streaming in. Kathy gripped the USB disc tightly as she perched on the edge of her bed. She practiced what she was going to say, her heart racing. She couldn't risk ruining this. This was her one opportunity to reveal Clara. Kathy heard Clara's laughing reverberating throughout the home from down the hall. Her laugh was light and pleasant, the type that gave the impression that she was in love, happy and kind. In the garden, behind a lovely archway adorned with white flowers, the wedding was taking place. The guests were seated and waiting for the ceremony to begin, laughing and talking while the chairs were arranged perfectly. Thomas's face was beaming with joy as he stood at the altar. His eyes gleamed with a type of happiness that Kathy hadn't seen in years, and he looked stunning in his suit. With her bridal gown following her down the aisle, Clara made a spectacular appearance. The visitors spoke to one another about how flawless she looked, gasping at her beauty. When Kathy looked at Clara, she could see the glimmer of coldness in her eyes despite the brightness of her smile. Kathy's palms were clammy as the officiant started talking. She stared around at the sea of happy smiles, her pulse pounding. They were all unaware of the reality and the threat that Clara represented. Kathy's hands tightened. She was at her breaking point. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be married, speak now or forever hold your peace, the officiant's voice echoed. The visitors, obviously anticipating stillness, chuckled gently. However, a little voice pierced the silence from the second row. Stop. When Kathy got to her feet, everyone turned. Her voice was powerful, yet her legs swayed. You can't marry her, Dad. She's lying to you. Shocked murmurs swept over the audience. Thomas's face changed from bewilderment to worry as he blinked. Kathy, what's going on? For the first time, a flash of terror appeared on Clara's face, and her grin froze. Sweetheart, she responded in a phony, sugary voice. What are you talking about? Did something happen? Kathy turned to her father, ignoring her. She doesn't love you, Daddy. She's pretending. She's been lying to you this whole time. Kathy, Thomas murmured softly as he approached her. We've discussed this. I understand that this is a significant change, but Clara loves us and has been making every effort. No, Kathy yelled, her eyes welling with tears. Kathy dug into her pocket and said, She has been lying. She doesn't love us. After saying, I can prove it, the USB disc was taken out. She added, I have recordings, Daddy, in a shaky voice. I heard her talking to someone on the phone. She's working with someone named Nathan. She's planning to take all your money and she's going to hurt you. The audience became quiet. Clara's eyes narrowed and Thomas's face became white. Clara remarked, This is ridiculous, in a harsh voice. She's just a child. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Kathy wasn't finished, however. She added, I saw the messages on her phone, as her voice became more forceful. She's working with Nathan. They're planning to take everything you have and she's cheating on you with him. The audience sent out gasps. The guests looked at each other in horror, and Thomas stumbled back as if the words had hit him in the body. His voice broke as he said, What are you saying, Kathy? Kathy held up the USB disc and stated, I'm saying she doesn't love you, Daddy. Everything's on here, the messages, the recordings, even pictures of her with Nathan. Please, you have to believe me. Clara lost her temper. Her voice raised as her hands balled into fists. This is insane. She's lying. She's jealous and doesn't want to share you. Can't you see what she's doing? Thomas gazed at her with mistrust in his eyes. Silently, he questioned, Is it true? Are you working with someone named Nathan? Clara's cheeks flushed as she stuttered. Of course not, Thomas. You know me. You know I would never. Show them the proof, a voice in the throng commanded. Thomas requested that one of the attendees connect the USB drive to a laptop that was being used for music by one of the wedding coordinators. Clara and Nathan's pictures appeared on the screen. Then came the texts, each more damning than the one before it. When Kathy played one of the recordings, it was the last straw. Don't worry, once the wedding is over, I'll handle everything. He won't see it coming, Clara said, her voice filling the room. Chaos broke out among the audience. The guests yelled in disbelief, and Thomas's expression darkened as he turned to confront Clara. His voice trembled as he muttered, "How could you?" As the visitors exploded into anarchy, the tension in the air was palpable. The photos and videos on the laptop screen caused others to gasp, point, and murmur. Clara's meticulously crafted facade was disintegrating more quickly than she could fix it. Clara said, "No, this isn't what it looks like," before advancing and forcefully closing the laptop. Normally calm and polished, her voice was harsh and frantic. "She's lying. She doctored those photos, those messages. This is a setup." Thomas gazed at her, his face inscrutable and pallid. His voice trembled and he replied, "Clara, what is she talking about? Tell me the truth." With wide, beseeching eyes, Clara turned to face him. "Thomas, you know me. You know I'd never hurt you. This is just a misunderstanding." Kathy took a step forward, her voice calm but her petite physique quivering. "This isn't a lie, Daddy. I heard her talking to Nathan about taking all your money. I found the poison in her closet. She doesn't love you. She's working with your business competitors and she's planning to hurt you." The visitors' astonishment gave way to indignation as they gasped more loudly. As others started to piece together the evidence, a murmur went through the gathering. Clara's well-crafted disguise drifted further away. Her voice sharpened and her hands balled into fists. She said, "Enough of this nonsense. Thomas, are you really going to believe a 12-year-old over me? After everything we've been through?" At that time, the room seemed to freeze. Every visitor, and attention was focused on Clara. The quiet was oppressive. And Clara seemed really disturbed for the first time since Kathy had spoken. She was aware that her facade of confidence was faltering. Clara's face became serious. Her shoulders tensed, and her own self emerged for the first time. Her voice had lost its softness and taken on a harder, colder tone. Her words, "This is ridiculous," were abrupt. "Do you hear how crazy this sounds?" Thomas, however, didn't seem persuaded. He had a cold, harsh, and unblinking look. He responded, "Answer the question, Clara," in a steely voice. "Are you working with Nathan?" Clara stumbled. Of course not," her voice cracking. "I don't even know who that is." Thomas said, "Stop talking," raising his voice for the first time. His authoritative tone broke through Clara's objections, and the room went quiet once again. Kathy selected one of the tapes once again. "Don't worry, Nathan. Once the wedding is over, I'll have access to everything. The accounts, the business, it'll all be ours, and then we can finally get rid of him," Clara said in a cold, calculating voice. Every face was marked with shock as the gathering burst into murmuring. "Make sure you have the papers ready for him to sign during the honeymoon. He's so in love he won't even read them," Thomas said, his hands balled into fists as he played another clip. The murmurs increased in volume. A few attendees seemed appalled, while others were incensed. Clara's well-manicured appearance was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Thomas looked to Clara, anger and sadness mixed together on his face. His voice was shaking as he shouted, "How could you do this? After everything we've been through, after everything I gave you, how could you?" Clara stepped back, looking around the room as if she was trying to find a way out. "Thomas, However, he interrupted her. "Save it," he said angrily. His voice broke at the last words. "You lied to me. You manipulated me. You were going to get rid of me." The truth of the situation struck him like a tidal wave. Clara's attitude dramatically altered when she realized she had no way out. Pure hate had taken the place of the phony tears and charming smiles. The words, "You're such a fool, Thomas," came out of her mouth with a tone of contempt. "You think this was about love? You think I cared about you? You were just a means to an end. All of this," she motioned around the room, "was just a stepping stone. And now, Thanks to your brat of a daughter, it's all ruined." Her abrupt change startled the visitors, who gasped. It seemed as if Thomas had been struck in the stomach. "I trusted you," he muttered in a voice that was almost audible. "I let you into my life, into my daughter's life." Clara gave a smirk. "And that was your biggest mistake." Thomas had already phoned the police and dialed 911 without her knowledge. She was about to walk away when sirens began to blare. It had been just the right moment for Thomas to phone the cops. Officers arrived in the backyard a few moments later, drawing attention to themselves right away. There was an officer who came forward. "Clara Stevenson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, and embezzlement." Clara's eyes became wide with fear. She yelled, flailing as the cops took hold of her arms. "You have no proof. This is all lies. You can't arrest me." However, her objections were ignored. The visitors stared in startled silence as the cops dragged her away, her cries fading into the distance. With tears running down his cheeks, Thomas fell to his knees in front of Kathy. He murmured, "I'm so sorry," in a voice that broke. "I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you." With her own tears streaming down her face, Kathy threw her arms around him. She said, "I just didn't want to lose you, Daddy. I just wanted to keep you safe." Thomas responded, "You did," and drew her closer. "You saved me. You saved both of us." With amazement and bewilderment in their voices, the visitors gradually started to scatter. Many of them paused to express their gratitude to Kathy, complimenting her courage and tenacity. However, Kathy didn't give a damn about what they said. She was just concerned about her father's safety. Thomas wasn't the kind to avoid awkward discussions. He was aware that he needed to make amends with Kathy and was determined not to let another day pass without doing so. After softly tapping on the door, he waited to hear her tremulous, "Come in." With a sad heart, he entered and found her seated on her bed, cradling a pillow. "Kathy," he said in a sad voice, "I don't even know where to start. I should have listened to you. I should have seen the signs, and I'm so sorry that I didn't." Kathy's eyes were full of unshed tears when she glanced up. Softly, "Dad, I was so scared," she murmured. "Clara wasn't just mean. She was dangerous. She threatened me, made me feel like I was the problem. And when you didn't believe me, I thought I'd lose you too." Thomas took her hand in his as he sat next to her. "You didn't lose me, Kathy. If anything, I almost lost you because I was too blind to see what was happening. But I promise you, I will never let anything like this happen again. You come first, always." Kathy had a sense of relief for the first time in weeks. It was a beginning, but it wouldn't be simple. Kathy's findings helped reveal a far wider plan in the days that followed. Clara and Nathan were members of a coordinated group that preyed on affluent people and companies. The police were able to destroy the scheme and bring all those involved to court because of Kathy. Despite his grief, Thomas was appreciative. He promised to make amends to Kathy for the rest of his life, to treasure their relationship, and to make sure she always felt loved and protected. For her part, Kathy was at last at ease. She knew her mother would have been pleased with her, now that the horror was ended. Stronger than ever, she and her father started to rebuild their lives together. A few months later, Thomas glanced to his daughter and smiled as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset with Kathy. "You know," he said, "for all the pain Clara caused, she did one thing right. She showed me just how incredible you are." Kathy rolled her eyes and chuckled. She teasingly said, "It's about time you figured that out." But she told it all with her grin. They were prepared to go on together now that she had forgiven him. Their strength had been put to the test throughout the struggle with Clara, but it had also strengthened their bond. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, prepared to confront whatever obstacles life threw at them. The biggest conflicts we encounter are often internal to ourselves rather than external to others. But even the worst of situations can be conquered with love, bravery, and a little faith.